welcome. Nice to see you again, Jackie.
Nice to see you.
Nice to have an opportunity to have you share some of your experiences with the city itself. So we're going to jump right in and start with your background and some of your early memories of the city of Lowell.
So thank you, Marie, and thanks so much for helping me and being such a great partner with this project. You've been amazing, and it's been an exciting project to work on together. Myself, I grew up in a large family in the town of Tewksbury. There were 9 of us, 8 girls, 1 boy, a very modest family, and certainly a place where we learned a lot. I mean, when you grow up in a big family like that, you learn you're part of something that's bigger than who you are. So it was a great place to grow up. I enjoyed a lot of fun times there with my sisters and brother. But of course, one of our favorite things was taking a little bus ride when we saved our quarters, hop on the bus and go into downtown Lowell. And Lowell was quite a city at the time. You know, it was bustling. The sidewalks were full of people. Big stores like Bon Marché and Cherry and Webb. Of course, our favorite might have been Woolworths because we could actually afford to shop there. But yeah, we have a lot of great memories about the city of Lowell.
And what decade or so was that?
As in the 1960s.
1960s, great.
Yeah.
Good. So a city that you didn't live in, but a city that you quickly became familiar with and comfortable in as a young person.
Oh, yes, definitely. Like for a lot of people in the suburbs, these gateway cities were very important to the surrounding community because they were the go-to place.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so your relationship with the city continues when you do, in fact, go to college. You are the only one in your family to go to college. So you come to Lowell State, as the university was called at the time. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Sure. Well, as you know, I was the first in my family, and actually the only one out of 9 children to go to college.
Oh.
But the truth is, you know, I had a couple of older sisters. They really should have gone themselves, but as we both know, things were different for women,
Right.
and socioeconomically for people from working class backgrounds to come to school. That was kind of a reach for me,
Right.
but I was really lucky. I really wanted to go to college, and I had a couple of sisters who really encouraged me, and also some high school teachers who
Right.
got behind me and helped me to apply. Of course, I chose Lowell State College because it was right around the corner. I could afford the tuition, working summers. I got a small little scholarship, and I commuted back and forth for, like so many of our students do today, Marie.
Right.
You know, I
Right.
made that choice, and it was a life-changing experience for me.
Good. Can you say something briefly about some of the faculty that you remember from your years at Lowell?
Well, again, I was just amazed at how brilliant the faculty were. These were, you know, intellectuals from all over the world. You know, I studied history, psychology, and sociology. My major was sociology because, again, I was thinking be practical. And when I came here, I thought I'd be a teacher.
Right.
But they eliminated the teacher education program, the baccalaureate that year. So I had to make a choice. I thought sociology, maybe I'll be a social worker,
Right.
not realizing that this was a field of study. To be honest with you, if that Bachelor of Liberal Arts existed today, that's
Right.
probably what I
That's
should have done
the major that you would have
I love so many across the disciplines, and you know, I just appreciate that richness exists today.
Right.
But sure, some of my favorites, I mean, Dean Bergeron and Joyce Denning in political science. I became very close to them. There were some other greats. You know, it's just a really different place then, and
Right.
it was. I learned so much. I'm very grateful for my education.
So it was actually you, Lowell, at that time, right?
It was.
Right. Okay. Right. So you were also
Actually-
just an interesting time for the university, as you were a student, to not know that it was maneuvering for its own merger.
Actually, the truth is it was Lowell State College when I came.
Okay.
And when I graduated, it was the University of Lowell.
You, Lowell. Okay.
I actually participated on the merger committee.
That's
as a
amazing.
student. I was very involved in student government, helped build the Women's Center here, develop a mass PERG organization, but yeah, I was also part of the merger. So
Right.
I watched that whole thing happen. It was really a great thing for
Wow.
what
just-
is now UMass Lowell.
Right, but
Yeah.
also that already sort of a front row seat for some of that if you were on some of those committees.
Absolutely.
And by the way, we still have Mass Purge,
Yeah.
running strong.
Yes.
Students come to my class each, beginning of each semester.
Yeah.
All right, so you get your degree. Can you now tell us a little bit more about how you became involved with the city of Lowell?
So while I was here as a college student, obviously late 60s, early 70s were a time of major upheaval, social upheaval in the country. 60s anti-war movement, the women's movement was in full swing. So like a lot of college students, I got very involved in that, as well as in community organizing.
Right.
And I was very fortunate in the city of Lowell. There were a great group of people who had organized a local community newspaper called The Connector, but The Communicator. Sorry about that.
Right.
UMass Lowell is The Connector. So The Communicator, we were also community organizers. And so we published the newspaper once a month, but it was really organized around trying to help make the city a better place. You think about it, when I came in the 60s, as you mentioned, this beautiful downtown had deteriorated. Like many gateway cities, the people of the city were struggling. There was a lot of poverty. So we used the Communicator to help us to organize groups to, for example, push through things like policies like rent control that really helped a lot of people. And we actually helped stop the Lowell Connector. The plan was to push it through downtown through a neighborhood of Portuguese community. So we did a lot, I think, to help. And I learned a great deal about community organizing from that experience. And I'm grateful to the people who really got that started.
And I think that's also where you met your husband.
It is. My husband, Ed, was also a college student. He was a student at UMass Amherst.
Okay. And working on the Communicator.
Of course.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So eventually then you're going to get a little more and more involved in politics. And if you get involved in politics in Lowell, that ultimately means meeting up with Paul Tsongas. So can you tell us a little bit about your early work for him?
Now, that's a great way to put it. We were involved in the city, and Paul he was on the city council and decided to run for Congress, his first seat in Congress, and we decided to jump in the campaign. We knew a number of people who were involved, and I remember seeing Paul Tsongas speak the first time that I heard him, and he was just such a visionary, and he had such great hope for the community, and he instilled that in others.
Right.
And he organized the campaign. It was a very grassroots campaign, which we've heard from other people who have spoken. That was really Paul's vision, was to engage the people of the city to identify how we could make this a more livable, enjoyable place to be. And so it was a lot of fun on that campaign. We knocked on a lot of doors throughout. I got to know the city very well because we were canvassing lots of neighborhoods.
Right.
But honestly, it was an honor to work and watch Paul Tsongas then and later in his career.
Right.
When I had advanced at the university, and seeing him to continue to build those partnerships around the national park, how to build a more cultural venue here in the city. There are so many parts of his legacy that you drive through the city of Lowell and you see it. When I drive down the river, and we have the boathouse there, and I drove by the other day, and that was Paul's vision, to transform. That was an old parking lot along the river. There was no access to the river in the city.
Wow. Yep.
And now it was just all families with their tents and cookouts and having a good time in the city, and that was all Paul Tsongas' vision. Right. He was great.
Yeah, so very community-driven, in
Yeah.
other words, that you work those grassroots, connecting with the community, and then responding through the either political means, social means to help.
All the above.
Right. Excellent. All right, so now can you say a few words about your early career and how that led you to also continue that relationship with the city?
Sure. So my early career, obviously, I had started out as a social worker in the city, and my husband was a teacher. And my first job was working at an organization called LARC that helped families and people with disabilities. And that's when I met Nancy Donahue. She was volunteer there. And I just can't tell you how much I learned from her then and continue to learn through this day. She was a great mentor for me, very generous to that organization. And I learned from her early on how important, and working in that first nonprofit, how important they are to the communities they serve.
Right.
So it was really a great start for me and for Ed as a teacher in the city.
Right, excellent, okay. And so from LARC, then you also moved on by the 1980s to work with the Indo-Chinese Resettlement Organization. Tell us about that, because that was, the 1980s was a timely time.
It really was. I was so fortunate to be touched to lead that organization, which was started by a couple of faculty members from here at UMass Lowell, Hai Fo and Lan Fo. And, you know, it was a time where there was a huge influx of refugees into the city of Lowell, Southeast Asian refugees in particular. And the city, quite frankly, was overwhelmed. Our schools were overwhelmed, hospitals were overwhelmed. There was a lack of resources, no interpreters, because, you know, of the terrible genocide that happened in Cambodia. Many of the educated people had been lost in the genocide. So we built this whole community of network, which I am so proud to say today, to have been such a humble part of something that transformed the city of Lowell.
Right.
And you look at the face of our city council, the legislative leadership, highly represented in the city with so many thriving Southeast Asian communities, which helped bring back the city. It was just a great story then, and I think about how it compares to what's happening now.
Right.
You know, Lowell has always been a place that just welcomes refugees.
Right.
And it did it then in the 80s, and I see this opportunity right now also to build those networks and help those refugees that are coming to our city to thrive, just as we did with the Southeast Asians.
Right, excellent, good. So you're already very active in the city, you're working as a social worker, you're working with some of these nonprofits, you're working with Nancy Donahue, with Paul Songus. What happens from there? You do start to have your own family, and how do you then get connected back again with the university?
Yeah, well, so good point. I did take a couple of years off. I had 2 daughters, and so I spent some time home with them and dabbled a little bit, started working at the university as an adjunct professor in psychology, and pretty quickly jumped into the administration. You know, Bill Hogan at the time, he knew, and he also was a very visionary leader. He knew the university had to change its culture. You know, at the time, we had a survival of the fittest mode, you know. Look to your left, look to your right, we would say to the freshmen, and only 50% of you will be left, and we said it with great pride. We were also really blocked off from the rest of our community, and we were isolated from the city. Bill Hogan knew we needed to change that, and gratefully, again, he saw something in me, mentored me, brought me up through the ranks. I started my early career really building the teaching and retention programs that we're so proud of that we have today. And then eventually, he moved me into the role of Dean of Continuing Ed, because at the time, we knew it was important to get beyond our kind of parochial little walled-in university and reach out to the broader community, and especially with our students, reach out beyond Greater Lowell. And then we did that through Continuing Ed and built that program.
Right, maybe say a little bit more about that, what years you were doing that, and again, some of those goals to have the vision that continuing education, online education, was a way to reach students who might not have finished their degree otherwise. So maybe just elaborate a little bit more on those years and some of the decisions that were made as you really built that program from the ground up.
Well, it's true. I mean, obviously, I had a great passion for students and helping students and building excellence in teaching and learning. And I have always had great partnerships with our faculty here, I have to say that.
Okay.
And so the idea with continuing ed was, again, to move beyond the reach, to reach, as you said, those students who wouldn't otherwise have access. We built a lot of very creative programming, and the faculty worked with us. And right there in the mid-90s, we heard about this thing called online education. And we knew it was a reach then. We had little dial-up modems. And, but again, I worked with the faculty, right?
We forget about the technology.
Yeah, but
Right.
the faculty were so willing and able to create opportunities for students to get to us. We knew adult learners just don't have the bandwidth to travel to UMass Lowell from the southern part of Massachusetts. That's kind of what we were thinking at the time. But then quickly we developed that program, as you know, into a nationally recognized program that reaches people all over the world. You yourself, I think, teach in that program. Thank you for being in.
I have some great things to do today.
Well, and I think as a university, we learned a lot of lessons in doing that. That was a win-win for UMass Lowell, because not only did we enable all these students to achieve their degrees, we generated revenue that we sorely needed, which also helped the faculty to develop their department. So this was a huge win, and I think it continues to serve the university pretty well.
Right.
Yeah.
Good, good. Okay, so from Dean of Continuing Ed, you then continue to contribute in the administration for the university. But just to parallel that your activity with the university, let's also add in here that as you're working for the university, you're also working for some of the nonprofits in the city of Lowell. So maybe we could talk about that before we continue on with your contributions at the university.
Sure. Yeah. So at right about that time, our careers had taken shape, our family was growing. We knew a lot of people in the city, like Nancy and Dick Donahue, George and Carol Duncan. To be part of this community, it was very much expected that you help and give back. We've talked a lot about that in this project. And certainly Ed and I have always been involved and engaged in the community. So very early on, I remember my first nonprofit. It was a friend of mine who came up to me and she said, I'm on this nonprofit, House of Hope. It's a shelter for homeless women and children, and we'd really like you to join the board. And I remember thinking, I was working, I had the kids, do I have the bandwidth? But also, what could I do for the House of Hope? I thought of board members as people who were affluent. We certainly were not that at the time. People who gave money back, we didn't have that kind of funding to give. But I said, okay, she talked me into it. I joined the board. Within a couple of years, it was so clear how much support these nonprofits need and what a difference you can make. Even you don't have to contribute philanthropically, just by being there as a support and giving and otherwise organizing skills, volunteerism. So within a couple of years, I was president of the board, and the next thing I knew, I was on Girls Incorporated, Lowell General Hospital, and of course, the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, which we've talked a lot about. But I did learn so much from all of those leaders who had a gift. It's just kind of amazing how much they thought through, and we've heard that throughout this project, how they thought through how important it was to recruit the next generation of people who would give back. So they saw it in Ed and I. Ed became the president of the MRT. So they obviously saw something in us, but at the time we didn't see that. But it was just brilliant, I think, because they did recruit that next generation of contributors to the community, which I think is the reason why in the Greater Lowell area we still have such thriving nonprofit community.
Excellent. All right. So in the process of some of the nonprofit work, you did, of course, regularly encounter Nancy and Dick Donahue. So maybe you could say a little bit more about them, since they figured so instrumentally from the 1970s on as part of the revitalization of the city.
Yeah. I just remember seeing them so many times. They're a formidable couple, and their legacy of the impact that they had on this city is profound. And those of us who have benefited from having their friendship and the ability to learn from them, it's just remarkable what they did. I can remember meetings, like impromptu meetings. I remember being at the Whistler House, and they were talking about building a park behind Whistler House, and it was, not a very beautiful area at the time, can I say that? And I remember Nancy and Dick and looking at a number of people in the room, including George Duncan, and said, "We need to talk." And they sat down and they started talking about how to get funding and resources to build what is now a beautiful park behind Whistler House.
Right.
So part of that was contributions from the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, for example, of which, Dick was the chair at the time, and I was on the board, but also George Duncan was part of that. So it was just interesting for me to watch how they really made these things happen.
Right. Really force of will, just making up their mind and saying this has to happen.
This needs to be done. How, not can we do it? It's how are we going to get that part?
Right.
So they were just amazing.
Yes, I remember you saying that Dick did run meetings in a direct way and was very demanding.
Yes. So I served on the board on the Community Foundation with him for probably about 8 years. And I did learn that this was the Community Foundation was going to grow. And, it was, again, for some of us in the city who are new to this, you want to raise how much money? $20 million that will go into an endowment for scholarships and nonprofits, and how do we get people to give to this? Why don't they just, give the money themselves? But Dick had a great way of communicating how important it was to pull these forces together, to marshal these forces, to build that endowment. Under his, I remember going, when we were at 10 million, he said, we need to get to 20. And again, we were all kind of, $20 million, that's a lot of money for this city at that time. We surpassed that, and you hear from Jay Linehan, and we thank the Community Foundation for their support of this project. That endowment now lives on and has seen the universities through so many challenges. I mean, I think of what they did during COVID for the nonprofits, and the legacy that Dick left in having that vision to build that great foundation, which is, that's there forever now and will help groups forever.
And I think we heard from Jay Linehan in that interview that they're up to a $60 million endowment, which again, for this city, going through all of the trials and tribulations that it has, it's impressive that again, there's been the people that have been able to marshal the resources to pull that together.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so now, returning from your parallel work with the nonprofits to come back to the university, in 2007, the university appoints Marty Meehan as the chancellor, and he also then immediately taps you to be his second. So can you say a few words about that experience and what some of the goals were that you and Marty had that you helped him with?
Well, first let me say, when it was announced that Marty Meehan was going to come and be chancellor of UMass Lowell, many of us who knew Marty were very excited because, again, we were at another turning point as a university, and we knew we needed to turn around. Like many public universities, I will say we were failing. We were very stalled. We had huge budget challenges, terrible deferred maintenance. Our enrollments were going down. So we knew Marty would bring a lot of energy. I myself had watched Marty in Congress and what he did for the city. Obviously, Marty was a partner with Paul Tsongas and a student of Paul Tsongas's work. So again, to watch this generationally continue, to be honest, I was kind of stunned when he asked me to be his number two, but And I've asked him a number of times why, and
Right, and what does he say?
he's never really told me. But honestly, I knew Marty, and I think he knew of me.
Right.
And what I had done at the university to build programs that benefited us both reputationally, like what we talked about with the online program,
Right.
but also the entrepreneurial side of it.
Okay.
Because we knew that we could not rely on the state to rebuild the university, to take it to the next level. We had to rely on ourselves, and we had to find a way to generate revenue. And so that all became part of the strategic plan. Marty was just an expert at working with government and
Right.
the local officials, and boy, he taught me a lot, and so grateful to him that the way he mentored me. I was a much better chancellor for having worked with
Right.
him for those first
Right.
8 years as his EVC. Yeah.
Right. One of the initial programs that you and Marty spearheaded was the 6 Pillars of Excellence, and one of those important ones was to really support research facilities and infrastructure through partnerships with the city.
Yeah.
That also helps with urban revitalization and those really important connections between the city and the university.
Yeah. No, so Marty had asked me to head up the strategic plan. That started in 2010. It was our Plan 2020, and it was really how we were going to turn the ship around. The 6 pillars, as you referred to, we had the obvious: excellence in teaching and learning, building the research portfolio, building our endowment. But what was unusual for us was we had leverage our legacy and our place.
Right.
So that was that partnership part that you talked about. Again, we knew, look, we live and work in this university is part of this city. As this city goes, so does this university go, and vice versa. So we had to have a strong partnership. So that was a key part of the strategic plan. We built so many initiatives. We took over the Sangha Center, turned that into a really thriving cultural venue. Working with the city, we took over other buildings that also benefited both the city and the university. But of course, one of my favorites was early on the start of our innovation hub. Obviously, that whole entrepreneurial economic development piece was under my domain, but we were really in the infancy stages.
Okay.
You look at big universities like Carnegie Mellon. Take their faculty's intellectual property, they commercialize it, and that's a revenue stream.
Right.
So we wanted to do the same thing. We had a little incubator going over in one of our buildings over on East Campus. And we thought this was a place where we could really take this to the next level and help the city. So we started working with the city. Hamilton Canal was just starting. It is now where the district court is. There was a beautiful big building in the middle of it. It was empty, 4 stories. They needed an anchor tenant desperately. So we did a lot of negotiating back and forth, because with these partnerships, there's always a challenge of trying to make it as win-win as possible.
Right.
So in this case, we partnered together and we did develop a plan. We went after federal funding, state funding, city funding, university. We pitched in our part, and we took our incubator, we expanded it, we took on our first 2 floors, and within a couple of years, we took over the whole building, brought in companies like Johnson & Johnson, and turned it into a business incubator space. So it's incubators for all kinds of small startups. It's home to our M2D2, our Mass Medical Device and Development Program.
And I think the fabric.
And the
textile.
Fabric Discovery Center was part of the later edition, you're right. And then you think, companies like Johnson & Johnson started a satellite right there in the innovation hub.
Right.
So again, we realized this vision that a lot of people didn't think was possible, to be honest, but it yields such great returns for the university and for the city that now that playbook is the same one we're using to further develop East Campus. Here we now have 10 acres of developable land, and we're working with a private developer, and we're looking at, again, how to have that creative private partnership with business and industry and the city.
Great.
We have Draper coming in with residents going into housing and businesses setting up, and again, we'll expand those startups. So it's really exciting to see that vision
Right.
expand again. So it's
Right.
really, you can almost take it back to the Paul Tsongas days of how people partnered together to make the city grow and develop. Very exciting.
It really did require a vision for the Innovation Hub because I remember being involved in 2005 with some of what the city called the JAM plan for that area of Lowell. And if you look at photographs of what that area of Lowell looked like in 2005 and said, oh, we're going to put in this new courthouse, we're going to put in
Good
more
reminder
parking,
you make.
We're going to put in this, we're going to put in more apartments and housing. If you look at those photographs then and you look now, it really would require a strong vision, a Dick Donahue type force of will to say, no, we are going to use that building downtown to start this innovation hub. So
That's a great reminder. If I could just build on that memory, because that really is an important reminder, because not everybody,
right.
if you drove through there today, you would not see that.
No.
But I do remember two events. One, just walking through we did a lot with the city, and we had our marching band one night walk from the Inn and Conference Center to Mill City 5, which is on
Right.
Dutton Street across
Right.
from the Innovation Hub, and over to in front of the Innovation Hub. They were lighting up the canal there.
Wow.
We were
Yes.
with the city manager, Kevin Murphy, and I think it was just a display of how far our partnership had come.
Right.
And I think, how far the city had come.
Right.
But the other part of that was, I remember also standing on stage because getting the funding was not easy, as I said. And what was also transformative when you think about it, when we opened the Innovation Hub, and I was chancellor, Eileen Donahue was the mayor and had risen, of course, to be a state representative who was key in getting that funding, and Nikki Tsongas was the congresswoman.
Wow.
So there we were, the top women leaders in the
Right.
city.
Right.
Again, just another small part of history
Right.
changing.
Right, exactly. So through the course of our interviews, we have seen with many of the other people involved in Lowell that this phrase doing well and doing good has been fairly consistent, that people who have managed to do well financially have been able to then turn around and do good with that. So could you take a couple of minutes to say something about your own philanthropy, you and Ed, to the university and to the city?
Sure. Obviously, it's very important to us to give back. We have been very fortunate in so many different ways. And so for us, I came to the university, Lowell State College, on a $200 scholarship. Sounds like such a small thing, but a group, the Rotary Club pulled together and they raised that money. So I'm a big believer in giving back at any level you can. I mean, Ed and I started our first scholarship. It was a $25,000 scholarship. Our kids were still in college themselves, so we were kind of eking out enough to just start that small scholarship. But eventually, obviously, as we did well, we wanted to make a bigger impact both here at the university and in the community. And so now we have the Moloney Scholarship Fund, the Moloney Scholars Fund, because for us, it's important that next generation have that same opportunity to get involved and to be a part of the university community through scholarship and help that we're giving them.
In addition to the scholarships that you have helped endow, you've also been consciously also helped continue this revitalization effort with buildings and physical places. So most recently, we have a renaming on the campus of one of our buildings. The music department in what was Durgan Hall is now Moloney. Could you say something about that project and how that philanthropy worked?
Well, obviously we're very honored and touched that the building will be rededicated, and You talk about things coming full circle. As you know, I led the campaign for the university, feel very passionate, obviously, about raising funds to support the great work we do here. And we raised $165 million in our campaign, very successful. One of my last gifts that I received was from my good friend Nancy Donahue. And it was actually to refurbish the inside of what will now be the Moloney Performing Arts Center. Because when you think about it, Nancy actually, one of her early jobs, career, was, I think she mentioned it in her interview, she was actually located right here on campus in what will now be Moloney Performing Arts Center, because that was the beginning of MRT.
Right.
So to talk about full circle, so she was very involved in that. The university had decided to recognize my contributions to the university as a leader, as well as my husband and I, our philanthropy. And in talking with Nancy, and she was so supportive. So the whole thing becomes even more profound for me to have it named that way. And I'm just very proud. But I think what's most important is symbolically what's behind all that. Yeah. There's a lot of people who have done a lot of great work on this campus. It wasn't about just my being chancellor, it's about a whole community of people who lifted this university up to what it is. It's about our community of donors and friends. And so I think this occurrence really is symbolic of all that.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, so to tie things up then, what advice would you give to the next generation?
So, well, I love to give advice to the next generation. We're faculty, of course we love to do that, take any occasion. But, you know, early in my career, I started a course called Values in Creative Thinking. It doesn't exist anymore, but, you know, part of that course, the students had to go out and find a project and make a difference in one semester. Well, later on, as I became chancellor, we started the Difference Maker program. Wow. And I went after some funding for that, and we have a philanthropist, Brian Rist, who now has funded the Difference Maker program. So it's secure in its future, but the idea there was to enable students to take an idea where they could have an impact, whether it's in a technological innovation or working in a local nonprofit, that they take that idea and develop that idea, they pitch it. So we're helping them to think entrepreneurially, to think outside the box. And for our students, Marie, as you know, I think one of their biggest challenges is to take a chance.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a lot of backup.
Right.
So we want them to have that experience, that they have an idea, take a chance to make it work. So they pitch their ideas and they can get a prize. And we know we've had probably 50 spin-offs, companies, people have become leaders in nonprofits already just in the short time that program exists. So I would say to the next generation, learn from that. All you have to do is think about what you're passionate about, think about where you think you can have an impact. You can start small, you can start big.
Right.
Either way, you're gonna learn a lot, and it will help you to always continue to make a difference in the future.
So to be a difference maker.
Be a difference maker.
Excellent. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Marie. And just to wrap up, you've been such a difference maker on this campus. Again, I thank you so much for being such a leader in this project, which means a lot to all of us. I think the history that we're creating to tell this story is just so critically important for the future.
Good. Thank you.